You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Dr. Gay, a Harvard student calling for the mass murder of African Americans is not protected free speech at Harvard, correct?
Our commitment to free speech...
It's a yes or no question. Is that corrected? Is that okay for students to call for the mass murder of African Americans at Harvard? Is that protected free speech?
Our commitment to free speech...
It's a yes or no question. Let me ask you this. You are president of Harvard, so I assume you're familiar with the term intifada, correct?
I've heard that term, yes.
And you understand that the use of the term intifada in the context of the Israeli-Arab conflict is indeed a call for violent armed resistance against the state of Israel, including violence against civilians and the genocide of Jews. Are you aware of that?
I would assume she's aware of that. Just like I would assume she would be aware that the chanting of "From the River to the Sea" is a call to genocide. That was Claudine Gay, president of Harvard University, being questioned by Elise Stefanik. That questioning of Gay of Harvard, of the president of MIT, of President McGill of the University of Pennsylvania, has now become part of the conversation regarding what's happening on college campuses. That it's one thing to say that we believe that there should be an interchange or an exchange, I should say, of ideas. But this is what's okay? Use the wrong pronoun and you're out. Call for genocide and you're cool. If Riley Gaines wants to speak, well, that's unacceptable. But if someone wants to call for global intifada and try and scare you from coming out of your dorm room, that's just fine. Well, it seems like these college presidents, these Ivy League, or as people like myself now call it, the ISIS League, they seem okay with this. So the question is, what is the proper response to this? Tony Katz Today. It's good to be with you. William Jacobson joins us right now, Cornell law professor, the mind behind legalinsurrection.com. Be sure to check out the site and all the good work that they do there. Before we get into maybe a conversation about the difference between the role of government and the role of the university, you are a college professor. You have been a professor while being you, and taking all the heat in the world for the past maybe 10 years now. You watch this happen. You watch these university presidents from the Ivy Leagues give this answer. What was your take?
Well, I think it shows really how pathetic the leadership of our most elite universities are. These were not impressive people. It's a wonder that really 3 top-ranked schools, 2 in the Ivy League and 1 not in the Ivy League, but the premier science and technology and math institution in the country, really were so unimpressive. They seemed unprepared. They seemed like they had been told what lines to say, and it seems like they were all prepared to say the same lines. And it really, I think that was my takeaway, is this is what's leading our most elite universities. That's really sad. So that was my initial reaction to it.
I think it's Bill Ackman, who is a Harvard alumnus and a donor there. It was Harvard, I think it was Harvard, referring to the fact that Claudine Gay, who is a black woman, got her job because of DEI, which I have no idea how she got her job there, but there's a question of, when you talk about not impressive, I think that there are a bunch of people who said that, how did these women end up in these positions if on a very simple subject, they can't say a call to genocide clearly can be seen as harassment? Now let's get into that. A call to genocide is not seen as harassment?
Well, I think we also have to understand how these things are happening on the campuses. They're not happening in quiet conversations where people are expressing their views. They're mobs marching through campus with bullhorns, okay? They're marching through libraries. They're interrupting classes and chanting these things. Certainly in that context, it's harassment and intimidation. So this is not can you have the viewpoint that, Israel should be destroyed? Maybe you can have that viewpoint. Can you shout it on a bullhorn while marching with a crowd of 300 people, trying to intimidate everybody around you? And I think that's the difference here. And I think that's a huge distinction, that it's not just what was said, it's the way it is said is meant to intimidate people on campus. And it's particularly meant to intimidate supporters of Israel, and it's particularly meant to intimidate Jewish students on campus, because a lot of these things take place targeting Jewish students, like at Cooper Union, where Jewish students were hiding in the library or some room in the building as these mobs were chanting these things right outside the door. So, and a lot of places there's attempts to break into rooms, like that high school in New York City, where they trapped a pro-Israel Jewish professor and were chanting these things. So, I mean, these presidents were not, in my estimation, being honest during that hearing. That doesn't mean they committed perjury, but I don't think they were being intellectually honest, because they know full well not just what is said and what the intention of what is said, but they know how it is said. And in those contexts, for them to play this game, that it's not intimidation. I think it was the president of MIT, if I'm remembering correctly, said, well, it could be threatening if it's directed at a specific person, but not if it's stated kind of generally. Well, I disagree with that. When you have a mob of 300 people trapping Jewish students in rooms chanting these things, that's intimidation and harassment.
Talking to William Jacobson, Cornell law professor, the mind behind legalinsurrection.com. It certainly does make sense, but I want you to, if you could, try and place it for us as you have seen, whether it be at Cornell or other places. Use the wrong pronoun, you could be thrown out of the school. They'll have whole assemblies and forced learnings about this. You engage in this cultural appropriation, engage in this misgendering, name the thing through the DEI CRT lens, and you're gone. You've seen this happen in both schools and in the private sector. How do they think that this doesn't apply?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, that gets to a point that a lot of people have made, that if they want campuses to be, complete, wide open, free speech zones, yeah, that would be great, but they're not. Okay, speech is highly regulated. They have bias response teams. They have concepts of microaggressions. Like if you ask somebody, where are you from? Most people would shrug their shoulders. That's not an offensive. But if you were to ask that question to an Asian student on campuses, you would be accused of a microaggression, or you could be accused of a microaggression, suggesting that they're not, from the United States. There's all sorts of insane regulations of speech on campuses. And then for them to show up and say, well, a mob of students with bullhorns chanting Intifada, Intifada, and we all know what that means, and targeting Jewish students is not intimidation and is perfectly acceptable speech. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't highly regulate speech so that anything that offends anybody is, a possible infraction, and yet make an exclusion for Jewish students.
So this gets to a conversation about the legal concepts regarding free speech. As we engage the First Amendment, it's that government will make no law. So the government can't say to these people, you're not allowed to scream for genocide. If you want to chant from the river to the sea, the government cannot stop you. But the university certainly could stop you. And it would seem that if there are these other things, as you're discussing them, that we say, well, we don't allow that, it would fit into that case. It is the difference. Can you describe the difference between what the government is allowed to do and what the university is allowed to do?
Sure. Well, if you're a private university, just like in your house, okay, people may have a right to shout certain things on the street, but they don't have the right to come into your living room and shout them. So private property obviously is not governed by, those restrictions on the prohibition of restrictions on free speech, but the government is. Now, I think it was the woman from MIT, again, I'm forgetting which one said what, but I think it was MIT, said, well, we construe our speech policies to be consistent with the First Amendment. So some schools, and apparently that school, says that, if it's allowed under the First Amendment, meaning if the government can't stop you from doing it, we don't stop you from doing it, But we know that's a lie. Okay, we know that's a lie on every campus. I don't know if there's a single campus which would allow you to say openly on campus things that are offensive to various, identity groups. But you have a constitutional right to say them, but there isn't a single campus where you can say them without getting in trouble. So that they're just not being truthful about how they regulate speech on campuses. And that's part of the problem.
You are now seeing, and it's Sally Kornbluth, who's the president of MIT, you're now seeing the backlash. There has been a conversation that Liz McGill, president of University of Pennsylvania, might lose her gig. You saw her what looked like a hostage video apology. You've seen Claudine Gay, president of Harvard, with a really non-apology kind of statement regarding her remarks on campus anti-Semitism. In the college world, has there been, from the alumni and donors, I mean, we hear about them here and there, bits and pieces of things. Has there really been a, hey, we're not putting up with this crap anymore. You change or we're out. We're pulling our money right now. Have you seen that in a palpable way?
I only know what's public information, and it seems like there have been a number of big donors who have done that. I think there will be a backlash against certain schools. I don't think you're seeing the backlash on campuses. You're seeing the backlash off campuses from alumni and donors who are usually the same thing. So, yeah, I think there will be, but I don't think these, top-tier elite universities like MIT, Penn, and Harvard really care, okay? Maybe they will when you get, 8-figure and 9-figure donations pulled, but I don't think they really care. They are so insulated from the world. They consider themselves above everybody else. They sneer at, most Americans. So I think there is a backlash building. I think it's a backlash at the top tier elite schools, but I don't know that it's going to make a difference.
And that's the part that I think a lot of people are at. You see these presidents make this statement. Some of them were kind of smiling while they were answering the questions from Representative Stefanik. You certainly have heard of people remove large amounts of money, but I haven't seen proof that things will change. I mean, I talked about this earlier regarding the way Jews vote, for example. I'm Jewish. I know you are, of course. Are they really going to change the way they vote in light of what happened on October 7th and in light of the way that the Progressive Party has really acted in not condemning Hamas, but throwing support their way, and groups like the Council for American Islamic Relations and others? In your estimation, if you were a betting man, William Jacobson of LegalInsurrection.com, any of these college presidents going to lose their jobs or change their ways?
Well, we know that MIT's president is not, because last night the board of trustees of MIT offered a full-blown support of her and backing of her. And so she's not going to lose her job. I don't think Harvard's president is going to lose her job. That would have huge implications because of her identity if they were to fire, a black woman president of Harvard. The one who I think is at risk is McGill for Penn. And I'm not sure why she's kind of being singled out by people. I don't know that her performance was that much worse than the others. I think maybe it was a little bit, but she's being singled out. And I think that's probably a reflection of pre-existing anger about what's happening at UPenn. It really, of the three who were there, it's the worst of the schools. And I know people who are, alums there, and they're disgusted at what's happened. Penn is the most active anti-Israel campus among the Ivy League campuses, with the possible exception of Columbia. I think Columbia might be worse, but the president of Columbia wasn't testifying to Congress. So I think that's why. So I think there is a significant possibility, I'm not saying it's going to happen, a significant possibility that this is the straw that breaks Liz McGill's back, so to speak, using that phrase, that because there was so much upset heading into this about what's happening at Penn, that this might just be too much.
William Jacobson, Cornell law professor, the mind behind legalinsurrection.com. I appreciate it. More coming up. I'm Tony Katz.